You're listening to The Stephen Torriello Show, building a platform of liberty for people in search of truth with a dash of hope and a life worth living. The Stephen Torriello Show. And now, here's Stephen.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. Donald Trump followers targeted by FBI as 2024 election nears. I told you guys, this is exactly what they're doing. We've been talking about this for months, and now you have all these other, podcasts and radio hosts talking about how the FBI is turning its sights onto the American people. If you listen to the show anytime at all, we talked about this months ago. And because I seen the writing on the wall that we're watching the rise of totalitarianism and the weaponization of our intel agencies targeting Americans. And it's really starting to ramp up, and it's going to the closer we get to the 2024 election. Because what you have here is you have a taxpayer-funded police state. So essentially, anybody that questions the government or thinks the government's doing a crappy job or calls out the Biden administration or any of that is now going to be considered a domestic terrorist. Yes, this is the route we're going down. It will indeed be a police state in probably 5 years, full-blown police state. If, of course, we don't win the election. But at this point, I don't know how we're going to have a clean and fair election. I really don't. It's already too late. The election has already been tainted because of what they're doing to Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Like, they would have to stop all of the indictments. They would have to stop everything tomorrow in order for this to even have a semblance of a fair and transparent election. But they're not going to. They're going to ride these Trump indictments all the way up. And then what's going to happen is they're going to ride it all the way up until the election. And then what's going to happen is Donald Trump is probably going to be convicted right before election time. This is how they're going to time it out. He's going to be convicted right around election time on everything. And then they're going to try and use that in the election. They're going to say, do you really want a convicted felon as your president? This is what they're going to do. So I'm just letting you know this is what they're going to do. Because we already seen it. We everything that I said was going to happen has already happened so far. As far as all the indictments, there's going to be more indictments on all kinds of other stuff. They're going to try and wrap up on the January 6th. And then what's going to happen is all of them are going to get turned over in appeals. All of these cases are all going to get turned over in appeals courts, in the Supreme Court. But it's not going to be till after the election, because appeals take time. They take years sometimes. And so, unless these people stop the targeting, unless the people stop the weaponization now, then this election's already been tainted. They've already interfered and influenced in our elections. Because now, what do you see? All over Twitter, all over Facebook, Donald Trump indicted 4 times with 91 charges. That is called interfering in an election. So these people are purposely charging Donald Trump, targeting him with the justice system using lawfare in order to convince people that they shouldn't want to vote for somebody that's been indicted 4 times and has like 850 charges. That is called interfering in a federal election. So we already know that's what they're doing. But now they're going a step above. And essentially anybody that calls that out, anybody that calls out the weaponization, anybody that calls out this corrupt government, anybody that goes up against the system is going to be considered a domestic terrorist now, a MAGA extremist. They're not going to use domestic terrorist because it's too harsh. So what they did is they pulled the term MAGA extremists. Because you guys remember when they came out with the ultra MAGA. You remember that? Well, that didn't poll well. So they stopped using that. There's no coincidences in this government. There's not. These people poll everything, and MAGA extremists was the one that stuck. And then you have Biden. If you notice the pattern, you have Biden doing all these speeches, and he'll say MAGA extremist at least 30 times in each speech. This is what they do. This is how they brainwash the masses. It's actually real propaganda. just like all the other totalitarian and police state regimes, they have control of the media, just like the Democrats. They have control of all the levers of government, just like the Democrats. They have control of the justice system, just like the Democrats. And they'll use the media to essentially brainwash the people so that they get support from the people. So you're sitting there, you're watching TV, and you see the cherries and berries, you see the red and blue lights, shining on your wall. So you get up, you look out the window, and you look down the street, and you're like, oh, there's Bill. I wonder what's going on. And then you're going to see Bill getting taken to the SUV or the paddy wagon with handcuffs. And the next day, your other neighbor's going to say, yeah, did you hear that, Bill? Bill is a MAGA extremist. Yeah, I guess he said something bad about the FBI targeting Donald Trump or something. I don't know. Last I heard, he said something about Joe Biden in the Biden administration. And that's the last I talked to him. And then Bill's going to be gone. And then your other neighbor across the street's going to be like, good. That's what he gets. That's what he gets for supporting Donald Trump. That's what he gets for listening to Donald Trump and following Donald Trump. That's what he gets. This is the type of environment you're going to be seeing. And it's not too far off from the story that I just told you. This is exactly the type of scenarios you're going to be seeing. And I was telling my wife today, it's not going to be like this big mass roundup of Trump supporters. They're not going to go send out hundreds or even thousands of FBI agents in one day to go round up all the Trump supporters. It's going to be incremental. It's going to be Bill down the street. It's going to be Todd on the next block over. Then it's going to be Linda down around the corner. That's how it's going to be. It's going to be one at a time, just like they're doing now. If you honestly sit and think about it, this is what blows my mind. If you sit and think about, since January 6th, how many Republican, conservative, Trump supporters are locked up right now or in the process of being locked up? It's in the thousands. Between the 1,300 or 1,400 of the protesters at January 6th, and they're not even done yet with those. They say they got another 1,000 they're looking for. The pro-life activists, the people in Michigan, the people in Georgia. I mean, you're talking about thousands of Trump supporters that are locked up or in the process of getting locked up or essentially being attacked with lawfare. I mean, this is how they do it. And it happened over time. It happened in a 2-year span. And so now you have to look back and you're like, holy crap. There's thousands of Trump supporters that are locked away. They're either locked up or in the process of getting locked up, or they're fighting lawfare. They're going bankrupt. They're losing their homes. Their lives are being destroyed by the Department of Justice. This is actually happening in the United States of America. I told you it was going to happen. I told you. And yesterday we did an article talking about just this topic that William Arkin is talking about, but he puts it in a different perspective. He's talking about it in terms of how much more aggressive they're going to get the closer we get to the election. And I even said that because the higher Donald Trump goes in the polls, the more desperate they're going to get. The closer to the election we get, the more aggressive they're going to get. The thing is that this isn't the first time this has happened. This has happened all throughout history, through the Soviet Union back in the 1930s. And actually, the term lawfare came from the Soviet Union and Berera, from Stalin's Soviet Union, where they would do exactly what you're seeing now. They would weaponize the justice system. They used the legal system to target their political opponents, and not just their political opponents or any opponents, and not just in the Soviet Union, but internationally as well. Quasi-legal hearings. So it was like, it's exactly what we're watching right now. Stalin's Soviet Union, when they used lawfare, it's exactly like what we're watching now. On the outside, it appeared as if it was justice. On the outside, it was justice. They called it justice. They went through all the motions. But then once you dig deeper and you start looking into it and you start asking questions, it ends up not being justice at all. It ends up being a weapon, a means to an end, a means for these people to get a desired outcome. And so that's exactly what we're watching now. all the news and media outlets, they're treating all the Trump indictments as if they're like legit indictments. But they know, and everybody else knows, that they're not real indictments. They're real. The paperwork is real. They filed it. It's going through the motions. There's going to be juries. There's going to be a judge. All the process is real. But the justice is fake. There's no justice. It's missing justice. And everybody sees it. But again, the media has been captured by the police state and is now being used as a propaganda machine. So to convince the people that what they're seeing is actually legit. You know what I mean? I hope I'm explaining it right. So what you're going to start seeing here in the future, like I said, you're going to start seeing them getting more desperate. The next thing you're going to see is they're going to start coming after podcasts. They're going to start coming after YouTube content creators. They're going to start coming after Rumble creators. They're already targeting Rumble for the Russell Brand thing. You see how convenient that is? The one platform where you can upload and say whatever you want. I mean, within reason. You can't. There is limits, but it was a free platform specifically designed to uphold people's First Amendment rights. And so, what a coincidence! One of their biggest content creators, Russell Brand, gets an orchestrated hit of sexual assault allegations by like 12 different women all at the same time. He essentially got Me Too'd. It's not a coincidence, folks. It's on purpose. There's probably a Democrat lawyer behind it. There's connections with the UK. What you're going to see up until the election is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen in your entire life when it comes to the weaponization of every single nook and cranny of this government and all of the bureaucrats' connections. The entire bureaucracy is going to be trying to interfere in this election. They're already doing it now. And they're trying to give this facade of justice, this quasi-justice that Donald Trump's 4 indictments are actually legit indictments. Like it's actually justice. It's not. And everybody knows it. But unfortunately, you have, again, just like Stalin had, you have the bootlickers, you have the brown shirts, you have the people that actually cheer for it. They cheer it on, not actually realizing what they're supporting. Because I'll tell you what, when all their opponents are gone, they're going to be getting a knock on their door too. And that's when they're going to realize, oh crap, they're coming after me now. And that's how it works. It's how it's always worked. The Soviet Union was not the first time we seen a weaponized justice system. They just created the term lawfare, that's all. They created the phrase lawfare. They streamlined the system. They created a whole system behind it. It's on record. You can read about it. It's locked in history. And what we're watching right now, it seems as if they're using the same tactics that the Soviet Union used back in the 1930s. I think this is an article that a lot of people missed. It was put out by the New York Post. It was about the Missouri versus Biden. Another aspect, another weapon that's going to be used by the Biden administration and the government and the deep state and the corrupt Washington establishment coming up to the 2024 election. The Missouri versus Biden is essentially where these judges compared the Biden administration's and the government's censorship to George Orwell's Ministry of Truth. So I got an article here. A lawsuit reveals vast censorship scheme by big tech and federal government. This is another branch of the weaponization of the justice system. In the Soviet Union, they also had to control the media. And it wasn't just with propaganda, but they also had to squash dissent. They had to stomp out any dissenters, whether that was the intellectuals, whether that was celebrities, whoever it was. That was the second arm of the weaponization in the media. They had the media propagandize the people, but then they also squashed any dissenting opinions. So they squashed out all dissent. Nobody could question what the media was saying, and anybody that disagreed with what the media was saying got squished or censored. This is exactly what the Biden administration was doing during the pandemic and they got caught. Because Elon Musk bought Twitter, we wouldn't have known anything about this. Nothing. And this is why the Biden administration, this is why they're coming after Elon Musk. And he's got these criminal investigations, and he's got these civil investigations. Oh, yeah. It's in plain sight, ladies and gentlemen. We can all see exactly what they're doing. So, I don't know Elon. I haven't read into his backstory. As far as I'm concerned, the guy bought Twitter so that the American people could see what the government was doing and how they used Twitter to interfere in our last election. And so God bless Elon Musk. As far as what he's involved in his past life or what and all that other stuff, I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, what he did as far as buying Twitter was a blessing. And without him doing that, we wouldn't know anything about the Biden and the federal government censoring Americans and essentially squishing dissenters, just like the Soviet Union did. So they got sued. It was the Missouri versus Biden case. And in that lawsuit, it revealed a vast censorship scheme by big tech and the federal government. So a little noticed federal lawsuit, and that's right, this article is right. It went very unnoticed by a lot of people. We talked about it, I think, in one episode very briefly, and it was when the Biden administration essentially sued to remove the injunction so that the federal government and the Biden administration can continue to censor people through social media. And then they got smacked down again by a different panel of judges. And so a little noticed federal lawsuit, Missouri versus Biden, is uncovering astonishing evidence of an entrenched censorship scheme cooked up between the federal government and big tech that would make communist China proud. So far, 67 officials or agencies, including the FBI, have been accused in the lawsuit of violating the First Amendment by pressuring Facebook, Twitter, and Google to censor users for alleged misinformation or disinformation. Victims of the big tech censorship enterprise include The Post, whose Hunter Biden laptop expose was suppressed by Facebook and then Twitter in October of 2020, after the FBI went to Facebook warning it with great specificity to watch out for a dump of Russian disinformation pertaining to Joe Biden with an uncanny resemblance to our stories. So essentially, the FBI knew this laptop story was going to drop. They knew that Giuliani had the hard drive. They knew it was going to come out in October, an October surprise. And so they essentially threatened Facebook and threatened Twitter that if they didn't censor any story that had anything to do with Joe Biden, there would be consequences. That's essentially what they did. They strong-armed these social media platforms. And in some cases didn't even have to strong-arm them because they actually had former intel agents working at Twitter and Facebook. It was like a revolving door. It was quite brilliant, quite sophisticated. And then they got caught by Elon Musk. It says, quote, "We allege that top-ranking Biden administration officials colluded with those social media companies to suppress speech about the Hunter Biden laptop story. The origins of COVID-19, the efficacy of masks, and election integrity," is how the lawsuit was summarized by intrepid Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, who is leading the action. The censorship related to alleged misinformation about the pandemic lockdowns, vaccines, and COVID-19, and included material from the esteemed infectious disease epidemiologist and public health scientists associated with the Great Barrington Declaration, which proved over time to be correct and eventually much of which was adopted as official policy by the CDC. So what you're watching is all these steps all coming together, and it's all going to be one massive, massive operation to essentially get Joe Biden across the finish line again so that these people can hold power. It doesn't make sense when the media says stuff like, oh, we can't let Donald Trump win because he's a fascist. We can't let Donald Trump win because the country was so bad. He'll ruin the country. He'll get us into war. He'll ruin the economy. They can't say any of that. And they know they can't say any of that because the American people got to experience a Trump administration themselves for 4 years, and none of that happened. In fact, they're using the same talking points they were using in 2016, in 2015, all the way up into the 2016 election. What were these people saying? The same exact stuff. Donald Trump's a Russian puppet. They were spying on his campaign. Donald Trump's going to get us into war. Donald Trump's going to ruin the economy. Donald Trump this, Donald Trump that. It's almost the exact same propaganda they're using now, except now, because of the weaponized justice system, the media has something to run on. And so now what they get to say is Donald Trump's been indicted 6,000 times. He's got 325,000 charges, and he's going to be spending 250,000 years in prison. All this stuff. They essentially build up and create their own propaganda. But now they're actually using the tools of the justice system, because conservatives, the American people, are winning the censorship battle. We are, because in 2016, censorship was a big problem. I'm not saying it's still not a problem. I'm just saying that now that Elon bought Twitter, we have these court cases and lawsuits. Now the American people know and believe that the federal government was censoring people. It's proven now. It's a fact. There's no denying it. They compared the Biden administration to a George Orwell's novel, a dystopian nightmare of the Ministry of Truth. So it is a fact. The Biden administration, the Democrats, all colluded with the intel agencies to censor people. So now the American people are winning the censorship game in that battlefield. Now they had to step it up a notch. Now they got to go for blunt force. And now it's the justice system. They have nowhere else to go but up from here. Ladies and gentlemen, it is going to escalate into exactly the story I told you in the beginning of the show. You're going to be watching your neighbors getting arrested. Hell, you might even get a knock on your door. They're going to be listening to your social media messages, because what they're doing is they're characterizing Trump supporters as domestic terrorists. And one of the key words you have to remember is anti-government extremists. So essentially anybody that's anti-government, right, is now considered a domestic terrorist. Well, I'm sorry, folks, but this government's awful. What kind of positive things are people going to have to say about a government that's persecuting Americans and interfering in their elections? Probably not a whole lot of good stuff. And so what you're going to have is you're going to have a runaway effect of violating people's rights. And it's going to become normalized slowly but surely. Incrementally, it's going to become normalized, because all the Democrats, all the people that are cheering for more blood by the Soviet-style Department of Justice, they're going to be completely okay with it. And we've made this reference before. The events line up almost exactly with the Soviet Union back in the 1930s, Stalin, Berera, Nazi Germany with Hitler. All these fascist regimes, all these totalitarian regimes, when they created their police state, the events are almost identical to what we're watching happen in this country right now. And if you know, and if, like I said, if you've been listening to the show for any time at all, we've been saying this for a long time. The reason I can tell you it's going to get worse, locking innocent people up or just locking people up for questioning the government or questioning the Biden administration, is now that you have high-ranking officials that are really pissed off that the conservatives are messing up their Ukraine scheme, their giant money laundering scandal that they got planned for Ukraine. And just in yesterday's episode, we were talking about the Clinton Global Initiative and how they're getting involved in the rebuilding efforts in Ukraine. The same exact stuff they did in Iraq and the Afghanistan war, and how the American taxpayer spent $8 trillion and the government lost $40 billion. They're setting up the same type of system in Ukraine, and they're pissed off that they got derailed by firing Kevin McCarthy. That is what all this is about. And so when you start messing with the Clintons' money, listen, I don't need to go any further. You guys know what happens. And so Hillary Clinton was doing a media run, and just like Biden is calling Trump supporters MAGA extremists, anybody that supports Donald Trump is a domestic terrorist now. But now you got Hillary Clinton on the media sending a clear message. She is saying the quiet part out loud. She is telling the system. She is telling this woman she's no lightweight. It's Hillary Clinton. She's probably one of the most evil people in our federal government. She has some of the most brute connections in the bureaucracy than probably anyone else, except for maybe Biden and maybe even Obama. Biden is just as evil, has just as many connections. He's not we all make fun of him being some dotard But Joe Biden has had a long career in the bureaucracy and government, and he's met a lot of people. I mean, his Rolodex, I'm telling you, his Rolodex is probably as thick as a phone book of people and connections that he has. But I got some audio here of Hillary Clinton saying the quiet part out loud, and this should terrify everybody.
Very strong partisans in both parties in the past. And we had very bitter battles over all kinds of things, gun control and climate change and the economy and taxes. But there wasn't this little tail of extremism wagging the dog of the Republican Party as it is today. Mm-hmm. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members.
Aha. There it is, folks. Did you hear it? A formal deprogramming of the Trump supporters. So what's next? Camps? They're going to start rounding up Trump supporters and putting them in camps? I don't know. They already got, 1,300, 2,000 of them? This is what I'm talking about. Like, at what point are we going to start seeing camps being constructed for Trump supporters? Is it that far off? Yeah, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. But I see a pattern here. There is thousands of Trump supporters either locked up or currently being prosecuted all over the country. Not leftists, not BLM, not Antifa, Trump supporters, specifically Trump supporters. And so, look, you could say whatever you want, but I notice a pattern. I'm seeing the bigger picture here. And it all happened over a 2-year span. What do you think it's going to look like in another 2 years? If we keep going down this course, because it's not doing anything but escalating. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And when you have people like Hillary Clinton coming out on national TV saying that Trump supporters need to be formally deprogrammed from the cult. And the worst thing is, you scroll through Twitter, you see all the leftists reacting to this type of stuff, and they love it. They love it. They cannot get enough of it. They would cheer if the FBI and the Department of Justice went around the entire country with a list of registered Trump voters and started locking them up and throwing them in some type of re-education camp. They would cheer for it. They would justify every single bit of it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how you have the rise of totalitarianism with police state powers. You have 4 things you need in order to implement a totalitarian regime with police state powers. You have to have the control of the media so that the media can propagandize the people. And then once you have a propagandized population, at least a large portion of it, you have control of half of the population. You have to have control of the judicial system, the judges, the intel agencies, the justice system, so on and so forth. And the last one is the elections. You have to have control of the elections. And it doesn't need to be like full control. They don't even have to admit that they have control of it. They can have control of it in the background. They can have semi-control of it. And they just put on this appearance as if it's free and fair elections. They put on this appearance as if it's actually justice. Like the judges and the juries and all this other stuff is real. They go through the process. They go through the motions. Boom, boom, boom. And then when you start digging into all this stuff, you realize, wait a minute. Well, those are the same juries you used on the last case. See, that's how they do it. I just wanted to get on here. I was reading this Newsweek story. It's entirely way too long to read, but I will post it in my podcast description so that you guys can read it. Read this article. It will blow your mind. I'm telling you. And then after you read it, share it with all your friends. And listen, I pray to God I'm wrong about everything. but I fear that I'm not. One of the reasons why I make this show is so that there is a digital record of everything that I'm saying, so that there's a digital record for the history books of exactly who was warning the country and who was cheering it on. I want history to show that I was fighting for the right side. And that's why I get behind this microphone and kind of just divvy out what I'm thinking at that time. I divvy out these news articles. I give my opinions. I give my perspectives. I make predictions. And frankly, I just level with you. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for the show. It's going to be a short one. I'm going to be working on a show right after this, and I'm going to be putting it out. If you guys have any questions, go ahead, send me an email, StephenTorrielloShow@gmail.com. Like I said, I'm going to leave this article and other research materials that I was going through. I'll leave those in my podcast description. Follow the show on any podcast platform. Share this show with your friends and family. Share the articles with your friends and family. Let them know what is happening. And any chance that you get, if there's somebody that you know that is cheering on for this type of behavior from the government and from the intel agencies, the FBI and the Department of Justice, sit down and have a talk with them. Explain to them exactly what I told you. Explain to them what the Soviet Union did, and explain to them the similarities between the Soviet Union and the stuff that we're watching now from this administration and this government. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I want you guys to have a good day. I'll be talking to you guys here in a little bit. God bless you. God bless America. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.